Hi everyone. So today we're actually going to be doing something a little different. David and I are going to be doing a discussion on a short story piece that we both read. Um, and since we're both very interested in the craft and the writing style, I think that the conversation will be more veered towards like the way that the story is written as opposed to just like the plot itself. And because it's a short story, it's not that long. We'll link there's a PDF of the actual piece online, so we'll have that in the Dropbox down below. It's
There's some
called
typos in
Cathedral.
it though.
Hmm?
There's typos, just a
Oh my
disclaimer.
gosh, you're so right. I was so confused. At first, I thought that like this was not the legit piece, but I was like, no, but it's like so believably good, and it's just typos that someone must have copied it. Like they literally typed it themselves.
I wonder why.
I think it's because you can't copy. Like, I think what happened was like, because I saw online there's a lot of PDF scanned, like, library copies of the piece. And this was before you can convert PDF to Word, is my theory. So, anyway, yes. Disclosure that there are a lot of grammar and spelling errors. Not a lot, but it's enough that you're like, wait, what's going on? Anyway, it's called Cathedral by Raymond Carver, and it was published in 1981. Do you have anything else that you want to say about the like general context and like premise?
I think it's from what we talk about when we talk about love, maybe?
Oh,
Is it
like a short story collection?
Yeah,
Mm,
I think it's
okay.
from that. I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, I actually read a little bit about him because okay, how I found this piece was actually through a short story collection anthology for 2024
Oh, it's
that I
from,
was did. And then in the like introduction of that anthology, the writer referenced this short story. I think he mentioned like just the simplicity of the subject matter. Um, but that it's like a lot of, short stories delve, it's not just the surface material. So I think that's what he was mentioning. You
um,
found it through one
I
of your favorite writers.
yeah, I found it through David Foster Wallace, but I never actually read it. Yeah,
Hmm.
David Foster Wallace is like my favorite writer, and like I think he was like really into Raymond Carver because he was like kind of writing around the same time as him. Like David Foster Wallace also started around like the 80s, but a little bit later, slightly later. I think Raymond Carver is like older, like generation, and he was just like from like the postmodern, like he's like postmodern. I don't know, like David Foster Wallace was just like really into like postmodern stuff and like postmodern writers. Whatever like postmodern means to you, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is very, very much in that like transitioning of like modern to postmodern. Um, okay, so let's just get into it. I think like for me, the like point of view was fairly interesting. It's from the husbands. So I think for me, there's three main characters in this story. It's the protagonist, who's the husband, and then there's the blind man, and then there's the wife, who introduces the blind man into their house. So in a way, this is basically like a one scene story. Like everything is told in past tense, but like what's actually happening is basically just them having dinner after the blind man's wife passed. Yeah, so I think that was really interesting. It's just like having this very like simple um like we only have his perspective. We don't know anyone else's really like thoughts of what's going on. And it's sort of like also furthermore contained through like the setting itself, which is very um domestic.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I think it's like one scene, but there's also like the mention of the wife's like previous, I mean his like childhood sweetheart, her childhood
Mm.
sweetheart, like the army officer too, in addition to the husband, I think.
Oh yeah. She called up she called him up on page 2 one night from an Air Force base in Alabama. She wanted to talk. They talked. He asked her to send him a tape and tell him about her life. She did this. She sent the tape. On the tape, she told the blind man she loved her husband, but she didn't like it when they lived. She didn't like it where they lived, and she didn't like it that he was part of the military industrial thing. She told the blind man she'd written a poem and he was into it. She told him that she was writing a poem about it, about what it was like to be an Air Force officer's wife. The poem wasn't finished yet. She was still writing it. The blind man made a tape. He sent her the tape. She made a tape. This went on for 2 years. Or, sorry, this went on for years. Um, yeah, so that was her previous relationship, right?
Mm.
He's telling the perspective of how she used to be dating this Air Force guy, and then even then she was in like she was kind of already talking with this blind man. Yeah, I feel like the like that excerpt on page 2 is also very like telling of the style of this sort of writing. There's a lot of just like back and forth, like, you know, they did this and then the immediate like this follows that and
I
then
feel like
it's just like very
his writing is very like minimal and like
mm,
terse. Like all the sentences are just very like factual and just like straight, and it sounds like the narrator is just very kind of like white man, like being just very, this is happening now, blah 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 blah. Like it kind of reminds, it's kind of like giving like, I don't know, like I don't know. It was just like I feel like maybe I'm too woke. It's like 2024 and I'm like maybe too woke, but like just the part about like he said like the blind man's wife's name was like Beulah or something, and then he was like, that sounds like a colored woman's name. Like,
oh
I don't know,
yeah.
that just sounded very, I feel like that's just like very jarring for like reading in this day and age. But then again, like David Foster Wallace also like in Infinite Jest, he like wrote like one of the first few section in one of the first few like sections, he kind of wrote in like kind of what he thought like a black woman's voice would be like. And it was also very like, okay, well, this is, I mean, it's just like very like from like a white man's perspective, and I feel like it's very like at the end of like postmodern, like I feel like the movement, like toward especially like in the 80s was like towards the end of like that kind of like centering of like that kind of voice, maybe. I don't know. Not to be too like woke,
That's interesting. Wait, what do you mean by centering whose voice?
the white man's voice. It just sounds very like the very, it's just very like minimal and like, like factual and like, not that there's anything, I mean, it's just like the voice. It kind of reminds me of like Bret Easton Ellis, like American Psycho, or like I feel like I've never actually read Cormac McCarthy, but I feel like he also writes in like a minimal way, which is like, I don't know. I don't know, like the story, I was like, I feel like I had like high expectations about it because like I heard about it from David Foster Wallace and like, but I don't know, maybe I'm just like Maybe I'm just too chronically online and like I have too many like preconceptions about like white people and like white men and like it just and like his descriptions of his wife and
Mhm.
like the way like her bathrobe was like open and he could see her like
Oh, yeah.
juicy thigh. I was just like, okay, this is just like I don't know, like it just all seems very like and then how his experience with like I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling right now. Like him
No, keep going.
like him
This is like from your
I feel like I'm just summarizing that like him smoking the joint with the like
the blind
I
man.
mean this is something that was written like almost 50 years ago. So that like it is kind of dated in that way. But I don't know, like I feel like even I don't know. I don't know.
I think that this is I think that it's very aware of like just how a man who's like living in his house kind of feels protective and this blind man is sort of like invading into his space. I think that's where I thought was like the interesting dynamic is he's kind of just like in the end there's like that redemption where there's like this like intimate moment where he holds his hand to like I mean this is we are kind of summarizing the plot which I said we weren't going to do but like even though this white man is sort of reiterating a lot of white man tropes I still feel like there's a lot of like critical feedback that this piece provides because it's like of course he himself is not criticizing like the military industrial thing and he is not criticizing the black woman who well we don't even know if it's a black woman he just assumes that she is the one that passed who's the blind man's wife Balua um but yeah like these are all like sort of connections that we make as a reader. We're like, okay, yeah, this guy is flawed. Like, I think that's the point. It's like we understand that this man is like he's making it very, very obvious to us, like what it looks like to be such like a, unlikable character, but like still has human qualities.
Yeah, I think it's like from his perspective that like the blind man is like invading, but like I don't know. I think it's like interesting like the interchangeableness of like the blind man and the like main character. I feel like in a way like maybe like he feels like I feel like the story is just very it's told in a very like ambiguous way. Like I feel like maybe the blind man to him represents like something like I don't know.
Oh, that's actually really okay. Finish your. I'm gonna let you like think through it. I was gonna add on. I think it is very ambiguous, and it's like intentionally ambiguous. That has like so the protagonist's wife has been in like very close connection with this blind man and so I think he feels a sense of jealousy for this blind man um yeah like you mentioned the part where he sees his wife with her thigh exposed and he sort of makes fun of the blind man because he's like oh like why do I have to cover her thigh because he's blind. And so like there I think that was very telling. Like for me, I recognized he was jealous. He was like, "Oh, I don't want him to see like my wife in this way." And then he like quickly just like, brushes it away and he's like, "Nah, he's not actual competition against me because he's blind." Or I don't know if that's the only reason, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel
Uh,
like the style was probably very like influential. I feel like he's a very like influential writer. It's just
mhm.
it's just like I just wish like I don't know, it just feels very like Ooh, 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 ooh. I don't know how to describe
Like
it.
like
It's
jittery,
it is very
jolty,
um intense.
staccato, huh?
No, yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
I also okay. Go on.
No, I don't have anything.
I wanted to go back to like what you said about like giving voice to um, like non-conventional characters. So like how you said David Foster Wallace tries to like think about how a Black woman would talk and like having that included. Like we can't, I feel like that in itself is not problem because it's like sort of he's trying to show that representation in his stories. And like here, I mean, does the blind man talk? I don't know. Do we actually hear anything? Oh, I guess at the
Of
end,
course,
we
the blind
hear
man
him.
talks.
He does talk.
Yeah, he's like,
Okay. Um,
I don't remember what he said, but I feel like he talked to the wife. Well, it said they didn't talk during dinner, and then like he talked to the wife, and then he and like the husband like had a conversation about the cathedral.
yes, the
It was
cathedral
like
part on page
described
12.
the he was like describing the cathedral to him, and he was like, "Well, I don't really know like
Yeah,
what cathedral looks like anyway.
right.
I listen or something."
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah, so I think there is sort of this like active character because before this, I think very rarely would we see acknowledgement of like disabilities or like yeah, like anything that's just like not like I feel like before in like classic European novels, we really only saw like poverty, like in Great Expectations. If you look back at um like Jane Eyre, there's a lot of like characters that are based off of like gender oppression, class oppression, but there's not really been a lot of like race and like ableism discussed. So I think this is like also like changing what can be talked about. And he does it in a very like interesting way because it like shows that like the moment where they're like watching TV where only the blind man can only listen basically. So I think that was like a very interesting way to like depict that like, you know, division.
yeah.
I'm just thinking on page 12 though, it's kind of funny because like so this is where they are talking about the cathedrals, and he says like downstairs in the kitchen I found a shopping bag with onion skins in the bottom of the bag. I emptied the bag and shook it. I brought it in to the living room and sat with it near his legs. I moved some things, smoothed the wrinkles from the bag, spread it out on the coffee table. The blind man got down from the sofa and sat next to me on the carpet. He ran his fingers over the paper. He went up and down the sides of the paper, the edges, even the edges. He fingered the corners. All right, he said. All right, let's do here. I think it means let's do here. I really hope it means let's do here, not let's do her. Because like that part, I'm not sure what other part, if that was a typo. But even before the typo, there is this moment where it is very sexual. Because like he ran his fingers over the paper, he went up and down the sides, the edges, even the edges, he fingered the corners. Like that is very much like, like erotic sort of movements. So I think that it's like sort of implied here that like, this moment is very like intimate for both of them. Or like it's a very like consensual moment.
Consensual?
Consent.
Sensual?
Yeah. Is that a word? I don't know.
You mean sensual?
No, I mean like it's consent. Like they both agreed to partake in this act of um, guiding the understanding of the cathedral.
Uh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I also feel like in the last few pages, like the previous parts, like the man doesn't really seem like cultured or like, you know, aware of his privilege. Like there is really not a lot of mention of privilege, but at the end where he like explains cathedrals, like that is not common knowledge. Like he shares a lot about like the architecture and like how French cathedrals are different from I don't know, like Roman cathedrals. And that just kind of made me think like, okay, so where did he get that interest from? And like also like how like it kind of I don't know if that matched up with me with the character. Like I wonder how why this author decided that cathedrals was going to be the point of like contact
I think
because
he
for me that's mm.
I think he was just describing like the cathedrals that he was seeing on the TV.
Yeah, but that even
Visually.
then it's like that's a very like educated way of describing things.
What that
Uh,
there's like buttresses
mhm.
and it's
No,
tall.
but then also there's just the comparisons where he's like I forgot where exactly. Just like the way that at the end that it just becomes a little bit too high art, high culture for me in a way that like rest of the piece is not actually in it's not it doesn't match the style. It like the subject matter doesn't match the style. Like I think it would have made more sense when he pulled out the onion skin bag and they started drawing if they just started drawing um like the newest shopping or like grocery bag something that's like very like work blue, like white blue collar. Um yeah. But I guess the way that they arrived at that scene was through TV and like the TV just so happened to be playing something about cathedrals. So I guess that sequence of events is somewhat more believable, but for me it's just like I don't understand I wouldn't believe that two random men who have been smoking would like somehow decide to like just, you know, discuss cathedrals for the final like event of the
Because it
piece.
was on the TV. That's what was on the TV.
No, but I'm saying like I don't understand why they would focus on that. Like why didn't like I feel like that's too complicated of a thing to talk about, especially when you're high.
I like the part where he said like the blind person can tell if it's a color TV or a black and white TV. I feel like
Yeah,
the inclusion of the TV is also like a very like postmodern
you're
thing.
so
Because like David Foster Wallace was also my mom's gonna get mad at me because I'm talking about David Foster Wallace. She doesn't like David Foster Wallace and she watches the videos. But like David
wait,
Foster
how does she
Wallace,
even know? Does she read Chinese, David Foster Wallace?
no, she just I'm just that obsessed with him. She knows like David Foster Wallace. Because I
Oh
was
wow,
like
okay.
always reading him in high school. Because I was
Mm.
like, she calls Infinite Jest my blue Bible. She threw away my copy of Infinite Jest.
Oh my gosh.
Like underlined and everything. Hi mom, if
Wow.
you're watching this, don't get mad at me right now.
I didn't even know she would throw it away. That's actually, oh my gosh, it's crazy.
I'm not mad
Um,
about that, by the way, mom.
no, but I think it's a good idea that you pointed to page, yeah, the TV part, which is page 7. Do you want to read it? Do you have it?
I don't have it. You can
Okay,
read it.
pull it up.
You can read it.
No, you decided to pull it up, so you should read
I
it.
don't. Okay, fine. What page is it on? 7?
Mhm.
Um, The blind man said, "My dear, I have two TVs. I have a color set and a black and white thing, an old relic. It's funny, but if I turn the TV on, and I'm always turning it on, I turn on the color set. It's funny, don't you think?" I didn't know what to say to that. I had absolutely nothing to say to that, no opinion. So I watched the news program and tried to listen to what the announcer was saying. "This is a color TV," the blind man said. "Don't ask me how, but I can tell. We traded up a while ago," I said. The blind man had another taste of his drink. He lifted his beard, sniffed it, and let it fall. He leaned forward on the sofa. He positioned his ashtray on the coffee table, then put the lighter to his cigarette. He leaned back on the sofa and crossed his legs at the ankles. My wife covered her mouth, and then she yawned. She stretched. She said, "I think I'll go upstairs and put on my robe. I think I'll change into something else. Robert, you make yourself comfortable," she said. "I'm comfortable," the blind man said. "I want you to feel comfortable in this house," she said. "I am comfortable," the blind man said. I forgot that the blind man had a name. I feel like the main character
Oh,
doesn't get a name.
does he not have a name?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. Yeah. Oh, that was another thing is that they would just first like describe the people. So like he switches from blind man and Robert. And like it just I don't know when the first time we understand his name. Um, but yeah, no, that was really cool because yeah, he just was like I could just tell and like we can just guess that it's from the sound
I
or
feel
like
like
he
I'm
just can
colonized.
how.
I feel like I'm colonized because like you know how I registered for that Chinese blogging website, Jinshu? And then like after literally the first essay I wrote, like I got banned because
Mhm.
like um I like wrote something about the Cultural Revolution and like that's not like allowed in China, I think. And also like maybe because there were like homoerotic undertones between Cho Feng and Ludwig Lee. Ew, I just picked my nose on camera.
I mean, it's fine.
I'm so gross. I feel like I'm like always touching myself. I feel like it's because like I have like a like desire to touch myself that like I can't. So it's like misplaced.
Stop saying touching us.
I am okay. Whatever. Like I don't know. This story is just very like I think it's okay to be critical about it. Like I just feel very
Yeah,
it makes me feel like I don't know. I don't know what the makes me feel kind of like I'm being colonized.
oh, like the way that it's written.
Like the voice and like the perspective. Like it makes me wonder if like Raymond Carver's like other writing is like this too. Because like what we talk about when we talk about love is like a very like interesting title. But I don't know. I feel like it's just like written like for white people. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I feel like it's just like because I heard this um podcast and it was like called What We Talk About When We Talk About, and it was like based on that like title. But I listened to the podcast and it was like very like not like easy to follow. I just feel like it's written for a certain crowd of like intellectual.
Like white liberals.
Yeah, that I
Yeah, I
just
am. Huh?
yeah, that's all.
Okay, I do agree. Like, yeah, this writing sort of teaches us to understand like this one singular man's like perspective, even if it's fiction. And you mentioned it's like in this very postmodern, like seminal text, and like people very much revered it. And so now as we read it 50 years later, we kind of question like what about it is like so fresh and new. And yeah, I think it's good to like have a critical lens of like, well, this is a white man and he did have like, well, so in his background, this man was,
Yeah, I'm not. It's charging. It's charging. I'm on the. Okay, I'm gonna have to.
uh, the man, like Raymond Carter himself, was not a privileged white man. So that's important to note is that he himself, I don't think was famous. I don't think David Foster Wallace was really that well. I think he was well known towards the end of his life. And he died prematurely because, you know, yeah. So anyway, from that, we understand that they're not coming from these like very high pedestals. Um, so
Wait, how do
it's
you
not
know it's not privileged?
because I wrote about Raymond Carter, I read about him. I
Oh.
looked at his Wikipedia page.
I just feel
Yeah.
like even with like Charles Dickens, like The Great Expectations and stuff like that, at least like I feel like it has like empathy for its characters. I feel like
Hmm.
this is just kind of like, like, oh, this blind man is like making me feel uncomfortable and like I have like this moment with him, but it's just because we're both high. And then like the wife is like whatever. It just like seems very like distant and like not empathetic,
Mm.
the voice to me.
Yeah. I mean, I
I
think it's
know,
also
I know that's like the vo like intentional, like the voice, but it just makes me feel like I don't know what's the point. I feel
mm,
like I'm being
it
very
makes you feel.
critical.
No, that's really interesting because I actually read a little bit too about like I think this sort of postmodern text really informs today's like autofiction genre because it's very like I, and then it goes into like stream of consciousness, internal monologue, and we see that a lot now with like, what is like contemporary literature told in the first person. And someone was like, there was an article that's about like the like drop of autofiction or like the failures of autofiction, and they say like it's because it's only in the point of view of the single character, and everyone else is just like a side character that works to like inform them as a person. So everything is very like, yeah, capitalist and like production work mindset of like, yeah, this is to like produce a better character for myself. And so all of these other like diverse people that the person encounters is it just becomes a trope, or they become sort of like agents or objects just for the subject. Um yeah, so I think that's a like valid point. And I do feel like this sort of writing, the reason why it's still relevant today is because people sort of copy it in like autofiction. And like they copy it in sort of
I don't
like
really know what autofiction is.
it's just like first person stream of consciousness. Um, it's sort of like like referencing yourself, but like in fiction. Like there's I don't know, you can just like look up autofiction popular books. I don't have one in particular that I know. I feel like David Foster Wallace is autofiction.
I don't think
Um,
so. It's like isn't it sounds like it's like more like your daily life, like talking about
but isn't that what David Foster Wallace does?
no.
Okay, I don't know. There's these
mean,
they say that Tao Lin leaves society is autofiction. There's
it's like autobiographical fiction.
yeah, and then you tell it in the first person, but you say it's not a memoir. It's like in between memoir and fiction.
Okay, well, are we gonna do another meeting or like because there's less than a minute?
What do you think? do we land? I feel like it got really good at the end where you mentioned the critical parts and the colonial aspects. I feel like that was like a very big, um, I don't know, hot take.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you gonna edit it or no?
My mom like walked in, so I feel like I need to edit that out.
Okay. Yeah, edit that.
Want to edit
Yes.
it? Should I cut this ending part out too? Like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I'll cut this part out. Okay, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. We'll be back again next week to